Welcome to the Friends of Work podcast, the podcast about mastering emotional intelligence at work.
Once you start making money, whether that's because you got a promotion or you're just working, planning what to do with that money and avoiding what we would call lifestyle creep, which is if you're renting a house or you own a property and it's fine, and then you get a big raise, then you feel the need to creep up your lifestyle and expenses, and you're not saving as if it was a fixed item in your budget, right? So that's what we would say as related to that question, which was a great one. What now that we're making this money, what do we do with it?
Hi, this is Ade Toye, and I'm your host on the Friends at Work podcast. You just heard Brad Sherman of Sherman Wealth Management. In this episode, Brad and I discuss personal finance planning and emotional intelligence. You can hear the rest of our conversation in just a few moments. But first, here's a quick announcement. In the coming weeks, the Friends of Work podcast with Aditoye will be bringing you even more exciting guests and events. To support this podcast and to learn more about our future plans, please go to patreon.com/friendsatwork. That is patreon.com/friendsatwork. Thank you.
I'm Brad Sherman, own a RIA firm, which is a registered investment advisor firm called Sherman Wealth Management in Gaithersburg. We help young families, young professionals, and divorced and widowed women mostly navigate budgets, cash flow, investments, and financial planning. We quarterback their financial plan and act as a concierge in some cases to finances and other things.
That sounds very interesting. That sounds fun.
Yes, it is.
It probably takes a lot of your time because just before we started, every time I see you, you're always on your phone trying to contact someone.
Yeah.
Or dealing with.
Actually extended an offer to an assistant today. Before then, it was just me. So she's starting the 22nd of October. So that's good. So 2.5 weeks. And I won't be the one because all the emails and things will be going to someone else. It's excellent. It's fine.
It will give you some more breathing room to grow the business too.
Well, as I said, and we're talking about emotional intelligence today and other things, I attended a funeral, so that was sad and threw me off of what we were doing. So, when you were getting ready, I was trying to catch up. But yes, to preserve my own emotional intelligence, you're right.
I do understand. That could be a downer a bit.
Shift the mindset, right?
I
to
know.
get ready and in the right state for doing something like this. So
at least it gives an opportunity to look at it from another angle.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So how did you get into financial planning?
A great question. I was always very analytical as a kid and actually helped my parents and friends and family make financial choices and decisions. We were talking about this before, but my first 6 years were spent in Silver Spring. My mother was a school teacher at Blair High School for 30 plus years. And so my parents got separated and divorced around the time that I was 14 or 15. And so helping my mother, navigate some of her things and a lot was I guess sort of I put on myself as my responsibility. And then also my dad, who was a young attorney, trying to navigate, the world of having kids and making the right financial decisions. And I had just seen just a whole market of underserved people. Really, both my grandfathers were immigrants to this country.
From where, if I may ask?
Well, what's now Belarus, but went back and forth between Russia and Poland during all the wars and things like that. But so that was something that my grandfather, they didn't know much about how to get ahead, but they knew that they wanted to be. That you had to be a shareholder, that you didn't want to be an employee, and to save and to do those things. And money and finance, which isn't talked about in a lot of households or a lot of cultures, was open in mine, good or bad. I knew things and heard things and helped and did things and really just focused on helping the underserved. So my mother, as I said, she was dealing with a insurance company that was her retirement account for the school teachers, wasn't great and doing some work with that and realizing through my own 20s and friends, as I mentioned, that there was no one around that I thought who was giving unconflicted advice in a consulting friend, type manner. So I went back to grad school when I was 30 to kind of get some street cred on the finance side, even though I'd been working with it for all my life, and launched my own firm when I was 33 and 5 years almost, and
Still going strong.
Still
right?
going strong. Haven't looked back, and been a great experience.
Okay. So did you work for someone before you went back to grad school?
I worked for someone while in grad school. You know, it was a 60-hour work week, 3
Whoa.
nights a week at American University. So, you know, drove from Bethesda to D.C., 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the semester or the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Recently married. I think we're going to get into it, which is great, but I don't always am able to see my own biases, if you will, but I've realized looking back that I've made my life, or at least the last 7-8 years, as hard as humanly possible. So I went back to grad school at night after I'd just gotten married. So God bless my wife for putting up with all this. But and then when I graduated from grad school, my wife was actually pregnant and some other things. I left where I was mainly because I thought that it was conflicted, and learned a lot about client service, and where I was great in the client service, great in the engagement, but I thought the delivery of the advice was somewhat conflicted. And so I'm what's called a fee-only financial advisor, meaning that the only fee that we make is from our client. So we make referrals all the time to accountants or insurance brokers if there's a need for life insurance, estates and trusts if there's a need for wills, and there's no arrangement or commissions or anything made by the advice that we give, which we feel really good about, and is a new type of model that I feel very strongly about and advocate for every day.
You talked about dealing with challenges in your own life as you were moving into this field.
Yeah.
You talked about helping a bunch of people.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges or some of the issues that you see people come up with in managing their finances?
Yeah, I was so happy to be on because I always say that I'm more of a psychological coach at times than money, which most people realize or don't realize until we sit down. But sometimes referee, as you could think about and internalize your own personal situation. My wife and I are very different on some of our goals, which is okay. Some of the things that we value, because you're coming from two different worlds and upbringings, which is also okay. So there's a lot of times where I'm the first person, because we deal with a lot of young families who are recently married or about to get married and other things, who haven't had a money conversation before, haven't talked about student loan debt potentially, or starting their own company, or maternity leave and what that may look like as it relates to raising kids. So these conversations that are so important for communication, for state of mind, for all the reasons that we all know. Sometimes I'm the first time that this has ever happened. And I should say that it doesn't matter the age. There are, in observations through my own growing up, you could be 50 years old and never have a budget or know what it is. Or, most of my passion was in grad school. I realized that I read a lot of the same books that we've talked about before, the Kahneman and Thaler and Tversky, and those. Now it's very in vogue of behavioral finance and those types of things. But I realized that there are all these really smart people in my program who are derivatives traders at Fannie and Freddie and working at the big accounting firms.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the first clue what a 401k was, or what a budget was, or what the best way to save for their children's college would be in a tax efficient way, and nuanced things that the little guy, and go back to that immigrant kind of upbringing, and the teacher and the immigrant thinks he's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's a professional, he's got his or her finances totally in order and in line. And I think that part of what drives me every day is to educate both ways and say, look, these people who are educated in their own right and go through 16 or 20 years of schooling haven't had a personal finance course either, just like you, right? It's not in the curriculum in high school or college, or even in a master's of finance. There's not, okay, now that you've made this money, what do you do with it? So
Exactly.
It certainly doesn't exist in medical school or law school or social work or any of the advanced fields, and even just with a simple college education. So financial literacy is a big, huge deal to me, and that's where we attack it. So the challenge is that most people don't know what they don't know. And telling someone who's a doctor, who's very accomplished, okay, well, you may make $300,000 a year, but if you're spending $400 and you're not tracking it, then you're worse off than someone who's making less and is able to save. So that's education and empowerment is key for me.
I think the question that you raised that was very interesting to me is, now that you're making all this money, what do you do with it? I think that's a question a lot of us don't really ask or don't have good answers to.
Right.
Particularly with changing times, or what the rules are in the market, or what to invest in, or what kind of returns that might come, and what was true or what is true today wasn't true 5 years ago. The opportunities that are available today were not available 5 years ago. Some of the opportunities that were available 5 years ago are not available today.
Right.
And so my understanding is that this is what you do. This is the kind of advice that you give to people to get them to be financially intelligent about their resources, their financial resources.
Right. Well, you unpacked a lot there, so I want to take it piece by piece and just say that a lot of times people get the investing component confused with the planning component. And so I would just want to make a distinction there that most people don't plan. Okay, so you brought up a great point. Once you start making money, whether that's because you got a promotion or you're just working, planning what to do with that money and avoiding what we would call lifestyle creep, which is if you're renting a house or you own a property and it's fine, and then you get a big raise, then you feel the need to creep up your lifestyle and expenses, and you're not saving as if it was a fixed item in your budget, right? So that's what we would say as related to that question, which was a great one. Now that we're making this money, what do we do with it? So that kind of goes back to the original point and how we get started, which is going over the goals and things that people want to do as a family, or if it's a single professional, someone who's working, what do they want to do for 1, 3, 5, and 10 years with this money? As you said, times are changing. The Federal Reserve just raised interest rates last week. The news cycle's so fast, I was just trying to remember if it was last week or whatever, with news every day. But the amount of news and the velocity of news through social media and other things. So the Federal Reserve raises rates. Great for savers, terrible for people with variable rate debt, such as student loan debt or home equity line debt, right? So the evaluation of what to do with the money changes as those variables change. So having that conversation more often, or putting a message out there through social media, as you said, the field and landscape is changing rapidly. That evaluation of, can I make more money in the bank, or what am I paying on my interest on debt? Those types of conversations are personalized, and I don't think that people know where all that stuff is to have that conversation, and so that's where it really starts, and that people don't even know what they have, which is crazy to say, but probably resonates with a lot of the people that are listening, in that they might have had 3 or 4 jobs, and there's 3 or 4 401ks around, and they only remember about it when you get a quarterly statement at the end of the quarter, which we just had. And as you said, no one is there, at least in the world that we're living in, giving advice on those types of things. As you said, people are chasing return, people are chasing, but that doesn't necessarily align with their goals.
So what are some of the resistance that you've experienced from talking to people to actually changing their lifestyle to fit with the goals that they've said they want to achieve, right?
I think what I love most about financial planning and the world that we're in is that it's parallel theme to a lot of what you're exploring, right? And I think that the answer is always one step at a time. I think that people really have these huge visions of, I don't know, laying at the beach with their wife in 20 years, or significant other, or having a vacation property or putting their kid through Harvard if that's what their dream is, or private school. But that starts with a framework of a budget, and then putting in, just like you would a car payment or any other thing, savings, paying yourself first, making sure that that's something that you're doing. A lot of people, and I love overhearing, and it gives me feedback and ideas from like lunch. So yesterday at lunch, there was about 8 coworkers, and they were talking about financial literacy and educating what a 401k was, right?
Okay.
So if your company matches or gives you free money to participate in the 401k, a lot of people don't know what that is, and they're not participating in it, and they're really leaving free money at the table, and so.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. Well, I don't know all of, so this is in full disclosure. I don't know what the plans are that we're talking about. But most employers, I should maybe downgrade to some post 2008, offer retirement benefits as part of a comp plan. So some offer what are called ESPP, which is, if it's for a public company, employee stock purchase plan, which is a benefit, which is a percentage usually of salary allocated at a fixed price depending on what the company's structure is. And then there's a 401k, which is usually pre-tax dollars. So if you're making $100,000 a year and you contribute 3%, just to use easy numbers, $3,000, usually there's a match of some kind from the company, usually 3%. So if you're contributing $3,000, the company's contributing $3,000, and you've saved $6,000 in a sense for your retirement. $3,000 comes off of the gross income, so the $100,000 becomes $97,000, and that money grows tax deferred until you're 59.5, or required minimum distribution, which is at 70.5, which we'll see how that may change with current legislation before the end of the year. But for young people, and that's what we're doing, is you can find $3,000, in your budget. I'm not a don't get a latte person. Get a latte. Do whatever you want. But there's got to be something that you're doing that can offset this free type of money. So take advantage. Young folks have compound interest in their favor and time value of money to let those grow, and what's called dollar cost averaging, which is you're contributing every time you have a paycheck. So it's divisible by the year. I would say do as much as you can while you're young, because there's plenty of studies that say, the earlier you get started, you can actually put away less money in a nominal amount, and you'd be further ahead than someone who starts later. So those are things that we're compounding interest, future value of money, time value of money, which again goes back way over even the most educated person's head. And I guess that would be the hardest thing that we do, is just simple, keeping it as simple as possible for people in a world that's very confusing for most.
So the thing I see is that even for me personally, I understand a bunch of the things you're talking about, but it's also interesting that sometimes you know what to do, but you probably just need a coach to get you through it.
Right.
And is that part of what you do?
Yes. I mean, we've structured the business for, again, going back to the people, because there are a lot of them out there that need help analyzing student loan debt versus, what they're paying, and cash flow. So they're not at a position, aside from a company 401k, to actually invest money. They need to keep and put their personal balance sheet in order. So we do act as a coach for all of our clients. I give my cell phone number out on my card and email. So I'm always available, which is why you were saying that I'm always on my phone, because people are asking me questions, which is great. Happy to do that. We took to the blog and social media because that's where people are living, believe it, as you know. And so we are positioned sort of like I would say like a personal trainer. You go to the gym if you're smart enough to know that you need to work out, which is similar to, contributing to your 401k at work. You still need help with the weights, even though you know how to do it. And I think the way that a lot of these firms are structured, they're sales driven, corporate culture driven, and what I always say is that they're fiduciary responsibilities to their shareholders if they're a public company, not to their clients. And so that's why I started the firm. So we coach and guide every step of the way and make ourselves available through numerous sources to make sure that that's understood.
So one thing, have you experienced a situation when you're given advice in one way and somebody reads something on a blog or one of their close friends who is not necessarily financially literate says, no, that doesn't work. And then it throws all your plans out of whack. I know this sort of thing potentially happens. Have you experienced this before? Or is this the sort of thing that you see happening?
We see it happening. It's very common, but we haven't had that disrupt long-term goals. Look, we have some clients where an athlete or lottery concept applies where, they're giving money to people that just came into their lives, out of the woodwork. And that type of stuff is self-sabotage. That type of stuff is hard because I'm just, as I always say, co-pilot. It's the client's money. It's the client's ultimate decision. Cliche, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So yes, and there's times in which the advice isn't taken, and that's okay. We believe that financial planning is a roadmap for the future and that it should be updated and checked in on, from time to time, and that you're not going to get everything right all the time, and that's okay. There's a great book that just came out that you'd be interested about an ex-poker player, Annie Duke, that's been making the waves around. It's called Thinking in Bets. And so, there's times in which a decision is going to be wrong, but that doesn't mean that it was the wrong decision at the time. And that outcome.
Okay, I like that.
Outcome isn't always the be-all, end-all. It's hard to quantify, especially when you're talking to a quantitative guy like myself, an outcome not being the only judge. But you never know what can happen. People are... Going back to your question about what happens when someone in the family or friend isn't with it but is giving advice, you have economists that have been predicting that the market was going to crash since March of 2009, which was the ultimate low. So you can have and find a headline that would fit confirmation bias or something. And so there's always a narrative that you could twist to make the point be yours. There was James Clear just wrote, something about changing people's mind, even with facts, is impossible to do, especially if their predetermined answer is already known.
Yeah. Okay.
So we find that occur, but fortunately, it hasn't disrupted anyone's life in a catastrophic way. And the only thing I could think about that's somewhat relative is, it's cliche, but there are people that find you who haven't been part of your life and want something from you, and keeping that noise out of your head is more important as it relates to disrupting financial plan than an opinion or people send us, what do you think about this research? And I always say that that's what makes a market. And that's what's interesting in whatever market you're talking about, is that there's always going to be a seller for every buyer. We were talking about Silver Spring and my mother's here and all the growth that's here. And for every person that thinks it's expensive, the other person thinks it's cheap. So that's interesting, in my world for sure.
What I'm seeing and what you do, I want to go back to a point I made earlier.
Sure.
Is you are advising people who aren't like millionaires. They might be, but you're talking to everyday people, right?
Yeah, the millionaire next door type person, yes.
Yes, or the next millionaire.
Or the next millionaire, right.
Before they get there. Right. I bring this point up because a lot of people, when you think about wealth management, most of us don't think about it when we're just earning regular salary or regular money. We're waiting to earn, 7 figures or, high 6 figures and above before we start thinking, what do we do with this excess?
Right.
And apparently the smarter thing to do is to start making wise decisions with the money when it's not yet a huge amount, right?
Right. Common misnomer. Yeah, that's, I would say, the biggest behavioral shift in mindset that people don't realize, mainly because the huge corporations don't want them. They and this goes back to the immigrant mentality in a sense, is that, if you're not targeted and being told that you can get ahead, how do you get ahead? right? And that is the mindset and what you're going through that and or leading to rather that needs to change, which is if you start when you're 20 years old at $3,000, even if you can't, like I said, even if you don't think that you can really find it, do it, because it really is. I don't have the exact data in front of me, but it's like something like $10,000 when you're 30. So
in terms of time value of
money, what you would need to put away to get to the same future value consistently over time, right? And so just like we said about kind of the mental blocks and everything is just to get started. And my grandfather used to say that life's built on the back of plotters and to plan every day. And so even if it's $1 or $5, which through low-cost solutions that we have and other firms have, the minimums, I think, should be broken in the traditional model of come back to us when you have $1 million. And education on that is really key. And it's hard to reach everybody. This is a great format. But, yeah, it's tough because the 25-year-old guy who's just starting his career, I was that 25-year-old guy. Fortunately, I knew to save then and it was good, and that's the message. That's the message. And if you want to do it on your own, great. Just do it. If you feel that you could go to the gym and work out on your own, as long as you're working out, fantastic. Most people can't do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, they say that there's always going to be a segment of people that are do-it-yourselfers, which is great. And then there's people that don't even know, and then like I said, we're consultants for them to either get them set up or have some type of accountability as much as they want.
Yeah, so, speaking in terms of emotional intelligence, I'm seeing the person who goes to the gym and works out on their own and actually accomplishes their goal, they're someone who's both self-aware and can manage themselves, right? But most of us don't even know what we don't know, first of all. And then when we do find out what we don't know, we need someone to walk us through the process, which is why we need your services. Right?
Yep.
Tell us a bit more about Sherman Wealth Management and what you do there. I know you've talked about it almost throughout this conversation, but this is a question specifically about that. And how do we contact you? Like, your pitch,
okay,
if you will.
Well, before I pitch, because I'm the salesman, I just want to say, going back to the emotional intelligence part, financial stress and anxiety is the leading cause of divorce. It's the leading cause of a lot of issues. And so I would say that
like a lot of relationship issues,
internalization issues, even if you're single, stress around money, however that looks like, whether it's debt, whether it's not knowing what to do with money that you've now made, whether it's earning zero at a big, large bank because you think that that's where your money should go, but now rates are at 2% on cash and you're, whatever that is, any of these stressors are tough, are very tough, are you never know what person's thinking until you walk in their shoes type of tough. I urge everyone to at least write down, even if it's on a piece of paper, what your income is, what your expenses are, to at least understand what that looks like. As it relates to the company, we've built an app and a lot of other technology that allows our clients and ourselves to see everything, which is the number one thing that people need to do. They don't know what's going on. They don't want to talk to their CPA because I have no idea why. I have some idea why, but they don't know where to turn. Their options are their parents, their clergy, significant person that's in their life, or another professional that they may know or have. And a lot of people just don't have those conversations. So they build up and then it's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So we find that most people who are too busy to even have this conversation want the technology at their fingertips to aggregate all of their accounts, which is what we do. So if you have a checking account or a 401k or other things, put into one centralized source.
So you have a full picture.
Of everything.
What it looks like, right?
Right, what it looks like. That's the first step in understanding what the needs are. Because if you don't know where everything is and it's in 10 PDFs or loose on Excel or something else, that's what we do. And so we do financial planning and we do coaching as it relates to, okay, Now you have kids. Now you have a spouse or significant other. These are the 5 or 6 things that you need to do to protect your family, to protect what you have, to do steps like, as I said, just left a funeral. You know, you see a lot of people, a lot of celebrities who die without a will.
Yeah, that's happened recently too.
So those types of things where people say, oh, you know, I don't need to talk to anybody. These things happen.
Well, let's pause there for a moment.
Sure.
Because now that you just mentioned celebrities not having wills, it was surprising that Prince did not have a will. And it was also pretty surprising that Aretha Franklin did not have a will.
Yep.
And I just remember thinking about it, and I was like, how's that possible at that level of exposure, I would think.
Right.
And wealth, that there was no future planning at their age. Yes, Prince died relatively young, but I think, my own thinking has always been, once you reach middle age, you better start, you have something
right
planned.
Yeah, you know, then you see like a guy like Mac Miller, who unfortunately he was 26 and he did have a will. So you have, I think you brought up something that I have to say, which is the number one thing that we see, which is beneficiaries on your IRA or 401k. If you don't have a will, update them. Make sure if you've been married or if you have kids to have a primary beneficiary and a contingent beneficiary.
So let me ask, where does this money go? I'm just curious. Where does this money go if you don't have a will? How is this disputed?
Yeah, disputed. It's a state's issue depending on, you know, the state that you're in.
What if nobody claims it?
Then it goes to the government, to be honest with you. So that's why you don't, that's the main reason why people want to have a will, even if they don't have much. You know, you read, which is interesting, as you said, The Millionaire Next Door, The Next Millionaire, or even when you don't know, but you read about a librarian who leaves $9 million or something to a charity, right? How'd she do that? Well, she makes the same and or less than the people that are watching out there, right? Consistency, every day, step by step, whatever it was per month for her to get to that point. And then she had wishes that she wanted to make sure were understood. This particular, but you see it all the time. You see people like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or Buffett, who wants to give all of his money to charity. So it's important, whatever you want to do with it, to document how you would like it to be, so that there isn't, even if you're deceased. So I guess there's a thing that it doesn't matter, but you have, in these situations, you have all this fighting and kids and grandkids and people. It's complicated, and it brings out the worst in people. So
yeah,
if you have that identified, it's very important. Very important.
So back to Sherman Wealth.
Yeah, so Sherman Wealth exists on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. At Sherman Wealth on all of those.
Oh, cool.
All those places. We provide content, blogs, and kind of share articles that we think are relevant for the clients that we serve. And the website, shermanwealth.com. And our office is in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And as I said, we have a couple different service models for depending on what you need. And there's no one that we feel that shouldn't be helped as it relates to financial planning and investment management.
Here's a little bonus piece from Brad about risk.
I will just say one quick thing about risk, because you were talking about risk in the markets and other things. And my emotional intelligence, my resting heart rate, as Jack Dorsey said in front of the Testify, is still the same, even though the market is down about 2% as we record this. But, risk tolerance, just like other concepts, are hard for people to quantify. And the traditional firms don't use analytics to measure risk. They use qualitative questionnaires that people don't really understand until the end. So we use quantitative approach to our models and scoring, mainly, if I could just wrap up on this point, which is, if we're all making the same amount of money and we go to a blackjack table, going back to this gambling, which is part of the statistics and all these things that got me first excited about financial planning, baseball and casinos, but the statistical side of my world. But you have 8 friends at a bachelor party going wherever, to MGM or wherever it is, and they're all, I'm 38, they're all 38, they all make the same amount of money, yet they all bring a different amount of money to the table, and then they're also leaving, and their threshold for pain is also different, right? So a lot of the bigger firms just say, okay, well, you're 38, this is where you should be, this is a cookie cutter model for you to invest, or your life plan, or this is what you should do. And so we take a very customized approach to that and give people these quantitative questionnaires to measure their own tolerance, so that they're not just lumped into, okay, you're 38 years old, this is what you should be doing. And we find that our Gen X, Gen Y, and millennial clients who are rejecting this corporate environment and culture are really into the customized approach to
bespoke approach to, like, this is for you, your risk,
for you,
for your personality, for your risk tolerance, for your goals.
Great.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I loved it.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/friendsatwork. That's patreon.com/friendsatwork. You can also reach me by email at myfriendtoye@gmail.com. My Facebook page is Friends at Work Podcast, and my Twitter handle is at Friends at Work US. Join me next time for another episode of Friends at Work Podcast with Ade Toye. Bye for now.